Hi, my name's Diana Bartelings, and I live in Rock Creek, BC on the Kettle River. I want to thank UNB for giving me this opportunity to talk about my art today. I started learning surface design back in 2013. My first workshop was with a woman by the name of Sue Benner, and I got a real bug for it. So over the years, my work has been changing as a direct result of this. So the piece I'm going to talk to you about today is called The Journey. I do have it hanging up behind me. The background fabric began as a piece of cotton that I soaked in apple cider vinegar, and I wrapped it around some rusted metal objects. I put it in a garbage bag, a dark garbage bag, and left it in the sun for a few days. Then it was thoroughly washed a couple of times to try and neutralize that rust action, and it was dried. Then at a later date, I soaked it in a soda ash solution and allowed it for at least 15 minutes, and I allowed it to drip dry. I'm just going to turn on my other camera here because I'm going to do a little demo for you on printing the rust and the silk. So, okay, so here's my rust fabric here. So I have it pinned to my print table. I have a screen similar to the one that I used when I made it, The Journey, and it's called a deconstructed screen. As I hold it up to the camera, you should be able to see little bits of texture where I have put objects into thickened dye. So the dye is a Procyon MX dye. I mix it with a sodium alginate that I make into a clear print paste. This is the sodium alginate, pretty clear. And then I put it on the screen and I put objects into it to allow them to imprint their shapes and give texture and definition in areas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the screen side down. I'm going to put some print paste in here. And then I'm going to start pulling the screen. And as the print paste starts to rehydrate the dried up dyes, the shape and the dyes will begin to transfer to the fabric. I'm just going to have a peek. Yeah, so you can see it's just starting to come through. And I'll move my screen around. And I'm going to put it over here. So I could also do this with a colored dye if I wanted and get some more color on there. But because I have the color from the rust, I'm just going with the clear print paste. And then once I've got my rust fabric printed up, I'm gonna add a little more print paste here. Once I've got this all covered, I'm going to move my screen directly over onto the silk, which is what I did in The Journey. I started with the rust fabric, and as it became full, I just moved it over onto the silk. And so that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna put a little bit more there. And I'm going to move it over now. and start printing on the silk. And so what I will do is I will keep pulling the screen until there is no dye left on it. So parts of it will have quite a few of the shapes that are showing up, and parts of it will be more of just the dye that's rehydrating and getting pulled through right now. So you can see that even though my print paste started as clear, it isn't clear anymore because it's mixing in with the dyes that came through the screen. And there's not too much left at this point on the screen. You can see a lot of it has come off already. And as it gets fainter and fainter, it gives different textures at different edges. So you can see on my piece, the journey, the stepping stones, the crossroad, and the moon were all made with the silk. And after I had dyed these, I allowed them to batch for a couple of days. And then I washed them and dried them and hung them on my design wall and just sort of thought about it. And I really liked the contrasting juxtaposition between the degrading rusted fabric and the luxury and sheen of the silk. You know, that contrast there I found very appealing. And so that's when I decided that I would put the two pieces together into one piece. So for Crossroads, I opted to start with the stepping stones. And they were going to be my pathway to the crossroad. Just going to come back to my other camera. So they were going to be the pathway to my crossroad. And I decided to make my crossroad long and wide instead of a square. And then I decided that I put that circle in there. And the circle, to me, I kept trying to find other ways to share the circle. There's some pink circles that came through in the dye from this process that we just did. And I was trying to repeat those, but in the end, I was happy with just the one circle. To me, it represented the moon. And so I thought a lot about what this piece meant to me. And I had this song, this old song of my mom's, one of the ones she enjoyed singing was called By the Light of the Silvery Moon. And that song went through my head for days, weeks. It just would not go away. So I came to realize that this piece was not about my journey, but it was about my mom's journey. She was born in 1923. So she lived through the Great Depression. She lived through the Second World War. She lost her beloved brother. They were very close in the war. His plane was shot down and he was never recovered. It was very hard on the family. Her life was not an easy life, but I know we all face difficulties in our lives and we all find ways to cope. Now, my mom loved a party, but eventually she became addicted to the alcohol. She was a high-functioning alcoholic, and even though she tried a few times to give it up, it always became her go-to. After my father passed away, my mother found herself penniless and depressed. She dried out. She took a long, hard look at her life, and she was at a crossroad. She didn't like what she saw. She didn't like what she saw for her future. And tragically, my mom decided to move to the other side of that wall by taking her own life. Now you can see the little square on the right-hand side there that has the diamond in it instead of a path. She has arrived at her destination. She is finally at peace. And I just want to say mental illness is something that many people struggle with, and many of those people self-medicate, and some people make the same choice as my mother. It's very hard for those of us that are left behind. And, you know, I do not have any answer about what we could have done differently. There are always the what ifs. So I know this is a difficult story to hear and to feel, but it is the story behind the journey. Thank you.